The next portion of this session will be an industry first. You will hear a living, breathing example of how the technology standards we've just shared that these folks have helped to create are being adopted. You'll see how one restaurant found a path forward via data standardization with RTN's customer record data standard and brought its suppliers along with them. RTN board member and standards advocate, CIO of Five Guys, Zerrick Pearson, will moderate a restaurant-to-restaurant peer discussion with Chad Mackay, CEO of Fire and Vine Hospitality. I hope that you will listen in and imagine the tangible possibilities inside your own organizations. Explore RTN's data standards with your own colleagues and your partners. And when you return to the office, find a way forward, a path towards standardization in your own organizations. Join me in welcoming my panelists to the stage.
Thank you. All righty.
Bright lights.
Indeed, very bright lights. Can you guys hear us okay? All right, so thank you all for joining this discussion. I can tell you standards are very near and dear to me. I worked on the standards with RTN, but to Angela's point, we all live and breathe this every day. So it's great to be able to talk to someone who's championed this effort and executed in their operations at their restaurant. So with that, I'd like to introduce Chris Mackay with Fire and Vine Restaurants. Chris, want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your org?
Yeah, you bet. Fire and Vine Hospitality is a Seattle-based company. We have 14 different operations that operate under the Revelers Club Properties program, so our loyalty program. We've been in business about 27 years. It's family business, and technology has always been a big portion of that. I grew up in both the restaurant side and then had a venture for about 10 years where I did technology consulting with Anderson in a number of different companies, and then came back, it's almost 19 years, I think,
oh, wow.
working with my dad. So technology's always been a core of what we've done, and yeah, so here we are.
All right. So with that, folks, I'm going to read this verbatim from this card. We're talking about standards. It helps to know what they truly are, right? So lift up my glasses here, bear with me. But standard is defined as an established norm or requirement for a repeatable task which is applied to a common and repeated use of rules, conditions, guidelines, characteristics for products or related processes, and production methods. I won't go with that one. Better put, standards provide specifications to hardware manufacturers and software providers to allow them to create products that work together. So for all of us here, I think the drive is interoperability among all the products that we purchase to make the execution of our business easier, right? And RTN created these standards for the sole purpose of helping restaurants innovate faster. So with that, we'll jump in, and Chris, I'll start. So what made you want to undertake this effort?
Well, the fact is we were looking at replacing a loyalty system. And with that, we realized that loyalty platform we've had that for about 10 years. So we had both 125,000 records of loyalty members, another 300,000 of email marketing people, right? So that was enough to kind of like, all right, we already have to extract this and get it converted. But then we started pulling in and looking at information of our reservation system that we've had for many years, our catering and off-site system and private events system. We had, in addition, we had some third-party marketing, applications. And so we started pulling all this data in, and we ended up with, I think, over 2 million records of customer data, some complete, some not, some with transactions. And we were looking at how do we clean that up and then build out the APIs and the transactions to feed back that information to both the new loyalty platform, but also to our reservation system, with our reservation system to make sure that it could kick off the POS and open a check with a loyalty member. And so getting all of these vendors to talk to each other, we were trying to define what the customer records were, all the different elements, and I had just been on a call, on an RTN call, and they were asking about, we need some real life cases. And I realized we should just be using this data record standard, and then that's the reference point we can use for all the vendors to then come against.
Okay. And so a lift like this isn't easy given all the players you just spoke about. So how did you get everyone to the table to facilitate that discussion?
Well, I think somebody spoke about it in yesterday's. We were doing a pilot with a CDP platform, and basically we said, they had worked with retailers and others, and said, would you take a look at these data standards, and will you adopt these for the hospitality platform? Because they wanted to go for other restaurants. And they took a look at that, spent a couple days, and absolutely, this is like a no-brainer. So that was first, is to get the CDP to recognize that was going to be, we were going to use the standard. And then all of the developers that were building the APIs, building the interfaces, and our website and loyalty platform, et cetera, could have one point of reference. I call it the Rosetta Stone, right? It's like, here's our common language. You can call it whatever you want over here, but this is what we're going to call it. This is the data type it needs to be, and all of us will draft from that from a definitional perspective.
Okay. If they could advance our slide for a moment. And
the interface writers, the APIs are writing too. They don't have to necessarily change their core code or what they're storing in their database in this terms of how they've named their naming conventions. But what I want is when they extract that information out and they assign names to it, we're using the RTN data standard for that, which I think, again, it gives us a common. The reality is when you're building all those interfaces, you need to make that stuff up at some level. And so why not take one that's already been well thought through and adopt that for all of the partners to work with? And you asked how did we get some of them to come on board. Part of it was piloting. Part of it was the importance of us as a reference point, right, for the supplier. So just leveraging those for the future. And I think that, that's key. And you just have to ask them, right? I mean, I think that's part of that was the final thing, is just ask them.
So in discussions we've seen, the ability to sell a product or code you develop to other customers is pretty key. Have any of your suppliers spoken to the fact that they can now use this and evangelize this with other customers in the hospitality space?
On the CDP side, they've already started talking like that, yes.
Phenomenal.
Because guess what? We're not the only people with this problem, right? Which is, again, I want to thank the people that have spent so much time developing these standards, because going back 20 years when I was with Anderson, I was working with EDI and aerospace manufacturing. Standards were everywhere.
Yes.
And so to come back in the restaurants and go, well, this makes total sense. I can't believe that. And yet, so incredible work being done. And as we go forward, reservations, all the other transactions that will come along, I think there's a lot more to do in this area. So, but yes, now the vendors can go out and talk to other restaurants that are having the same type of issues and go, oh, you know what? We actually have a plugin. Oh, we can actually update your reservation system. We already have that built. So we've introduced, I'm an investor in a number of different places. We've introduced companies together. And so now they've basically have done the pre-plug-in stuff for future.
The lift is easy. So let's talk about the other departments involved and how this was received. I think we all live with that we are the IT, the marketing, the operations, you name it, but getting all these stakeholders together to understand the value of what we're doing and getting their feedback on the results. So can you speak to that process to any degree?
Yes, I wish my technology lead had a family emergency, because he was the one herding all the cats and helping push those things through. So I think for getting obviously I was at the table, I believed very strongly in having the best guest information that we can have. That loyalty was a big deal, but then we had all this other information that we need to unlock as well. Marketing, we have a number of different marketing teams, and they had been used to kind of this unified platform that did everything okay, but we were breaking it all apart. And so like the screaming and machinations of the fact they've got to learn some new systems, even though at the end of the day, it's going to give them incredible opportunities to market and slice and dice like they would never before. And then, good thing on the finance side, I'm kind of the owner, so was able to do that. So not as worried on the financial aspect, other than I knew that we had to unlock this information and really make it so that we could monetize through marketing campaigns, promotions, the surprise and delight opportunities that I think Will was talking about. And so, those teams, again, because we had done things the same way for so long, there's a cultural change to break that apart and come up with the best of breed. And so, building out brand new website, building out new mobile apps that we'd always kind of used prepackaged stuff before, it has stretched that team. And yet at the end of the day, next month we'll have stuff that I would have just dreamed about having, 5 years ago. We're going to have it, which will be awesome.
And that speaks to the results piece, right? I think they realize just how valuable it is, and it's been. But we know these can be complicated journeys. So can you speak to the folks who actually executed? And I know Ashish isn't here, but can you speak to any of his part of working with his team to really get this work done?
Yeah, I think that, both Ashish pushing forward and saying, yes, let's adopt the standard. I'll get our CDP on it. We'll then work with the technical team on the development side. Obviously, I'm not leading that portion. The great thing is he understands his role from an IT perspective is to help enable the business get more information and leverage the data that we have. So he's not just like, oh, let's make everything work smooth. Like, what is the basic question you guys are trying to answer? What are you trying to do from a marketing perspective, a revenue penetration perspective? And so he has a great mindset of not just a technical component, but what is it the business is actually trying to do? And what are you trying to accomplish? I think that once we got teams on board, then the web development, the app development side, being able to use APIs, feedback into the CDP, that gave them a good roadmap and a common language to use.
So you mentioned the word API. When we talk integration in this industry, APIs are kind of where we all default to. They're not easy, they change. Have there been any significant updates to any of the APIs since you've started this and felt any of the lift of that change downstream? Or I guess because of the standard, has that process been a bit easier?
Well, you still need the vendors to have APIs that are published, that are stable, that are good. And we have some that have been long time. Others, their API was never meant to do the volume of records that we wanted to do. Okay. And so they've been pushed. So on our reservation side, they've been pushed to have a much more robust API than they had before for guest updates, guest merge, right? So now because we've got the CDP, we're now have cleaned up all these records. Well, now I need to inform all the other systems. And so there's been some upgrades that are happening both in real time and down the road that will impact our ability to do that, faster and less batches.
So let's talk benefits for a moment and resources, right? We undertake these efforts to save money and make ourselves faster and more efficient. That's the promise of standards. Have you realized that across your org? Has everyone recognized the fact that there are savings or efficiencies to be found in applying a standard?
So I think for that, I'm not sure there's as many efficiencies yet. Okay. Just because I had all these disparate systems that didn't talk to each other. So just the fact that I have a common data set, common customer record with all the attached attributes and spend and down to the item level details, I know that's gold. So that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
Just happened to be that there was a standard that we could use that helps facilitate that. And I think as we go forward, I'm looking at, on our reservation systems and the other places that talk, what are those standards that are, have been published, and how do we get our vendors and suppliers to adopt those so that if I need to do an extraction, we talked about this a little bit, if I need to do an export or an import, that data standard's there, and I can say, hey, export the reservation, transaction, and it's the RTN data standard, right? No matter how they stored it, what they call their tables, what they call their fields, that I can extract that as the RTN standard. So I think that's a place that the industry can go.
So we speak to the fact that we hope our suppliers will embrace these in an effort to drive innovation and make our lives easier. Is that something you'll look for in the future in vendor selection, is those that are using these types of standards?
Yeah.
For bolting on your
Absolutely.
systems?
Yeah, and that are open to them.
Okay.
Right, and so again, I was talking to Ashish, and we were talking about some of our vendors, and we're not asking them to rewrite their code base. We're not asking them to change their data structure sets. What we're asking them is give us a view into that's standard, right? That's this view. And so, I mean, in my very old days of database, it'd be like we created a custom view with names that we all understand, and it didn't matter what the individual data sets were. So I think that, I think there's a lot more talk of adoption of APIs and non-closed systems. And I think, if you're selecting vendors, we should be selecting vendors that are open.
I can tell you, having a global purview, roughly 28 countries, applying standards and working with vendors in different countries, it can make life so much easier. You're not addressing languages and code sets and programmers in different countries and things. It just radically simplifies this entire process. So RTN has developed these standards. Angela spoke to it over the last 5 years. There's a host of them. The customer data record is just one. All of them are available on the RTN website, and I advise everyone, suppliers and operators, to go look them over. For the suppliers, adopting them serves your customers, allows you to serve your customers better, faster. One of my nomenclature terms I use is faster, better, cheaper, and that's what standards represent for me in this industry. That's why I'm a big believer in them and an advocate. But for operators, the onus is on you as well to drive the supplier partners to adopt these to help us all, because we're in this together and there's a benefit to all of us the more these are adopted and supplied. So with that, Chad, any sort of closing remarks you'd like to leave the audience with on the standards conversation?
Yeah, I think, again, if you look at the hospitality industry, restaurant, I'm not even gonna say hospitality, because the hotels, airlines, a lot of them already had some standards because of Sabre and all those things of getting interoperability. But for the restaurants, we're behind, and yet we have an opportunity to catch up very quickly using standards, using open API frameworks, using the things that we know are best practices from every other industry out there. And we don't have to be original in those things. We can actually be original in our hospitality, how we present, what we actually do, but let's not be original in our interfaces and APIs and data record standards. Let's adopt a common framework and reduce the amount of work and friction for every integration that we have to do. And every, frankly, transformation, when you convert systems, it would be nice to go, hey, just convert that data record set and then ingest it over here.
And to frame that, what you've undertaken is effectively a digital transformation of your customer management process.
Yeah.
So phenomenal work. For me, the fact that your systems communicate bidirectionally so easily, where a record can be updated in any one of the systems and those changes communicate back to the others effectively, is astounding, right? In the IT space, we tend to say there's one system of record, and that's where updates are done and they're pushed to everywhere else. But uniquely, adoption of standards allows that execution, that modification of a record to be done anywhere and shared seamlessly across the stack. So with that, that's all we have. An open, thank you.